keeping Spears versus dropping him.
The Colts took down the Bears 21-16, covering as 1.5-point favorites. The under did cash here at 43.5. Anthony Richardson, could you please, man, complete over 50% of your passes for one game? Certainly was not today. 10 of 20, 167 yards, and a pair of interceptions, one of which was absolutely horrendous. Man, look, Dwain, we've got a lot invested in Richardson. I'm not jumping out of the plane, drastically free-falling plane at this point. But, man, some of the off-target throws, like his incompletion just hurt a little bit more than the other ones that you'll see out there. Just completely sailing one over Josh Downs' head. That could have been an easy 10 yards. And then guess what? When Trey Sermon ends up vulturing his touchdown after he gets down the 1-yard line, we do not make up for it in fantasy land. So Richardson helped push Sermon into the end zone. If that helps your fantasy dud feel any better. But overall, panic here for Anthony Richardson fantasy managers, Dwain, because again, week 1 was great. Last 2 weeks, not so much.
Yeah, look, it's still what you had to expect. Like, we knew that he was going to struggle as a passer. He's got 212 yards, 204 yards, 167 yards. I want to say in our fantasy life season long projections, we had him projected for like 210 passing yards per game. So he's basically right at that. We just need him to come through on the ground. Like right now, we're not getting what we want from him, on the ground. Like he's still getting the carries in, but the last 2 games, his scrambles when week 1, 3, down to 2, down to 1, only 8 yards on scrambles today. Design rushing attempts still had 4, but only for 20 yards. So the efficiency really hasn't been there on the ground where we expect him to be someone that can make those really big plays, like Justin Fields was even 2 years ago. Despite the fact that he wasn't a great passer, we were like, okay, but we can get a 50-yard touchdown run out of this man. So I do think those things are ultimately going to come back to Anthony Richardson, but Justin Fields is kind of in a similar spot, and we haven't seen him really breaking out. So I do get it. Like people looking at some of these dual threat quarterbacks that, aren't doing it on the passing side. We're not seeing what we necessarily hoped out of them early in the season, but I do think it's too early to bell because we have very, very long-standing trends on these things. Ian, remember the quote we had? We were like, okay, quarterbacks under 3,500 yards passing, so not really good passers that had at least 100 rushing attempts. We've seen 21 of those since 2011. That's how many times we've said this, guys. It's burned into my freaking skull. I'm not looking at anything right now. They averaged 21 fantasy points per game and average finishing as the QB 8. Anthony Richardson's still going to score fantasy points. It's just been a crappy 2 weeks.
Remember, Dwain, if he doesn't finish top 12, I got to ride my freaking bike all over Indianapolis. So in addition to my bank account, I would really appreciate it if Richardson could get things going. Next week against the Steelers, though, like Dwain, that's a tough matchup. Colts versus Steelers in week 4. Would you rather start Anthony Richardson or Sam Darnold?
Oh, no, man. We got to go Derek Carr right now. Yeah. It's like I think when you look at the matchups like that and the really tough spots, if you want to get away from Richardson, I don't blame you. But I'm not going out of my way, to do it. I mean, this week, we saw Justin Fields go out and play against, a rush defense that's been really tough with the Chargers, and he scored his rushing touchdown this weekend. So these things can be really weird, but I wouldn't blame someone, Ian, in the tougher matchups against the run if you want to get Anthony Richardson onto the bench. I get it.
And for what it's worth, it does seem like the backlash for, someone like Richardson, it's not a racial thing or anything like that. I just think it's the dual threat quarterbacks because we're used to their passing numbers being down. Like when they don't score on the ground, it's almost like made into a bigger deal than when we just see the pocket passers not find the end zone through the air, because almost like their ceiling isn't as clear in our minds, if that makes any sense at all. But anyways, elsewhere on the Colts, Jonathan Taylor, 110 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Again, looked very good out there. And Dwain, we got the elite usage back, 87% snaps. Does seem possible that big drop off in week 2 could have been more due to Taylor having that ill-timed drop in the 3rd quarter on 4th down. Whatever it was, not that Jonathan Taylor was leaving our lineups anytime soon, but God forbid we can get this consistently, Dwain. This is top 3 level utilization.
And Jonathan Taylor looks amazing. Jonathan Taylor looks like the Jonathan Taylor from 3 years ago. The burst, the vision, the strength, the elusiveness, the tackle breaking, like all of it. Like, and it's funny. It's like, I'm looking at some of these numbers for him, it's like his yak was 1.8 yards after contact was 1.8 today. Like, not the plays I was watching. Like, okay, so
they weren't touching
right,
him because he was finding the holes.
That's
I guess.
true.
I don't know.
He was just. You're right. It probably was a yards, but you're probably right. It probably was a yards before contact thing today.
That's why Yak's a little sometimes.
Yeah, it can be. So Jonathan Taylor looked great. Like the elusiveness and the acceleration was there. So when you look at JT, yeah, you mentioned it. Like 87% snap share this weekend. Ian, 77% rush attempts, and 91% route participation. Man, that is astronomical. He had an 11% target share today. So yeah, JT very, very locked into the mid-range to high-end running back one conversation. You should be feeling absolutely great. If we could just get Anthony Richardson to do anything, like JT, man, the upside, like he scored 27 fantasy points already for you today, so you're not complaining. But man, it would be really nice if Richardson could make this offense, if we could sustain some things and maybe convert some third downs.
This was not the easiest matchup, and even the Packers are playing a bit better on defense than I think we expected. So maybe we'll look back at what Richardson's been doing early on the season and cut him a little bit of slack in a few weeks. But last point here, Dwayne, we did get the return of Josh Downs. And look, Michael Pittman's still the alleged number one in this offense, but I would be surprised if he's inside our consensus top 30 next week, maybe even top 36. So I get it. We can't really trust any wide receivers in Indy right now. But with all four parties now involved, Dwayne, who was the odd man out?
Yeah, it was Adonai Mitchell with Josh Downs back. So Adonai Mitchell today, route participation fell to 9%. So this is a guy, look, yeah, 9. 9 as in not on the field. So you look at Josh Downs, man, 73% route participation, also tied for the team lead with Michael Pittman with a 28% target share. What's that worth when Anthony Richardson's your quarterback? Not much right now, but again, maybe Richardson can get a little bit better. Today, Josh Downs was mostly used around the line of scrimmage. Ian only had, looking at his air yard share, 8%. So he was not getting thrown down the field. And Alec Pierce kept his role. He was still the deep guy, 91% route participation. Obviously didn't come through today, only 4.9 fantasy points, but it was Alec Pierce staying on the field and Adonai Mitchell headed to the bench. So Mitchell can be dropped, in most of your leagues. We'll keep an eye on it for you. If something happens and it turns around, we come back and we get him. Maybe it's an injury. But even with that, Ian, it's just tough. We now have Pierce doing enough that we know he's going to be involved every week. So we have 3 wide receivers with Anthony Richardson. They're going to run the ball. He's going to be inaccurate. It's going to be really tough to start any of these wide receivers. As much as we love Josh Downs, and he is someone that if you're playing in a deeper league, you should be picking him up off the waiver wire because he is the clear-cut number 3 right now in the offense.
Over on the Bears side of things, 363 yards and a pair of scores through